to me, that's probably the biggest challenge in cybersecurity is how do you incentivize doing the right thing?
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to two distinguished guests about a topic that we've been hearing a lot about recently. The title is In Our Quantum Era, and we're going to talk about post-quantum cryptography. And this is a really fun topic because a lot of people think it's far, far away, but it's actually not. And we'll have two really great panelists talk about their perspectives and what they're hearing and seeing in the marketplace. So Scott, maybe we could start with you. A quick intro on what you've been doing and how you've been involved with post quantum.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I lead our emerging tech security practice at Accenture in the Americas, and we spend a lot of time, especially since about August of last year in particular, focusing on helping our customers with quantum security, thinking about what's next in space and subsea security and a number of other, developing areas. But quantum is definitely getting a lot of the focus and attention this year.
Great. Trey.
Yes, my name is Trey Guinn, field CTO at Cloudflare, based in San Francisco in our headquarters. And quantum's been, on our radar for a better part of 2 years at this point. I work a lot with our research team and trying to bring that research to our customers, also to governments, and help sort of drive the industry forward. Our mission is oftentimes to try to help make the internet better. So this is part of like patching the internet with better encryption.
Great. So let's jump in. The first question, and maybe I'll direct it to Trey. What is the post-quantum landscape look like today? Are companies really prepared? Are they preparing? Are they aware of what's going on? What have you seen really work and not work?
Well, that's a good question. So to start with, obviously, like on all things, it depends, right?
Sure.
Like you get everything across the board. It's RSA week. We're in San Francisco. We're having lots of conversations about this. And it goes everything from what's post-quantum encryption to we have a roadmap and what have you. I think the place that I look at is radar.cloudflare.com, where we talk about encryption standards being used on the internet today. And what's really impressive to me is that a year ago, we were at 5% support of PQC cipher suites, and we're approaching 40% now globally. And when I also looked into specific markets, different countries, you'll see that even spiking above 50%. So this was a topic that was theoretical a year ago as a conversation topic, but we're seeing it really sort of emerge in the sort of forefront of a lot of people's minds, because not only all the quantum research and around quantum computers, but because of our work with Chrome and Firefox and the other browser community, we're seeing the actual adoption in real life at scale. So it's a quickly emerging space.
Got it. Scott, what are you seeing?
So a lot of what we're seeing is, like Trey said, conversations a year or two ago were primarily focused on, specific industries like financial services that have a very long risk horizon, or governments, and they were very technically focused on a specific kind of capability. Now customers are coming to us and they're saying, hey, we have a board mandate and we have budget and we have a regulator that's breathing down our neck, and we need to be not just, testing out this stuff. We need a business solution for post-quantum security that ensures that we're going to be compliant and that keeps us safe across the board, like soup to nuts. So it's a much broader conversation. It's more holistic. We used to think about it as being primarily, TLS endpoints for APIs and for websites. And, Cloudflare has been testing this out for years. But I think a lot of organizations are starting to realize that the scope of what needs to get fixed is so much bigger than that. It's every certificate, it's PKI, it's all your machine identities. There's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's your commercial operating systems and software. It's your open source supply chain, your hyperscalers you rely on, any hardware that you still have, it's a big, big scope of work that people need to manage. And I think they're just starting to realize how much work it's going to be.
And of course, regulators are that breathing down everybody's neck as well. And so I know we talked briefly about this. Where are the regulations going? And I know, Trey, you have a perspective on this as well.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll start with you. Where do you think regulations are going to go?
So we've seen a few places, again, in financial services where industry-specific frameworks kind of led out in front of the formal adoption by NIST and other agencies. But in the last 6 months, we've seen, like you said, a Cambrian explosion of regulatory changes from governments and industry groups around the world. And depending on where you are, they might be a little further ahead or they might be lagging behind. They might be more or less prescriptive. But from the European Union to, the state of New York to South Korea to, NIST, even PCI version 4 now has a requirement for a cryptographic inventory that you maintain every year. And you have to have a roadmap for adopting the latest standards. And so I think even people who have managed to avoid it so far are not going to be able to avoid it for very long.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it too, completely agree with everything you just said, is whatever industry you're in, small company, large enterprise, if you start to look at the sort of organizing bodies around that industry, every one of them has recommendations today towards post-quantum.
Sure.
And so all you have, that is, the writing's on the wall. So we see some regulations coming down now, but we see it, the recommendations are there and will become requirements over time.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it now, it's coming, right? Yeah. So that's definitely the case. There's this notion of crypto agility, and a lot of companies struggle with that in terms of thinking about what does that really mean? What does that mean in terms of preparing for it, but also having the ability, again, with all of these regulations, all of these changes that you have to make. What do you think about what is crypto agility, and how can executives, CISOs, think about crypto agility?
Yeah, so the way I'll jump into this is the example of there's still organizations working on their transition from, TLS 1.0 to 1.3,
Sure.
And it's this big program. It takes forever to move in that direction. What we're talking about now isn't just supporting post-quantum safe cipher suites. It's really also about supporting whatever the next cryptographic requirement is.
Got it.
And the other thing that we see emerging because of the state of the world and the geopolitical situation, we're seeing more protective economies, more sort of sovereign internet and sovereign regulation. We're actually expecting sort of like sovereign crypto libraries as well, or crypto requirements.
Yes.
So you can imagine if you're doing business in Korea and having to support their cryptographic algorithms, and then having to do something else in Brazil and something else in India.
And we're talking about Middle East earlier, right? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that, to me, that's what cryptographic agility is this ability to say, okay, I have workloads, I have users, I have applications I need to be able to deliver in a market. How can I be agile in the cryptographic standards that I'm using in those places?
And for global companies, that becomes exponentially a task that they have to simultaneously do that across multiple geographies, right?
And this is a fundamental different change. If we're all old men here, right, with I see gray in their hair and the beard. Like, we remember when we had to turn on encryption.
Yes.
It used to turn on encryption, and then it's just teeth and nail to get from TLS 1 to 1.3.
Sure.
Now we're talking about making it actually agile. This is no longer a binary change. It's actually having that flexibility to meet market needs and market demands.
And you can't have the performance hit that you used to have, and you can't have So there is an expectation of performance that goes with that agility as well. So completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, technical changes like a new 47-day maximum lifespan on certificates implies automation for the way that you manage your stuff. You can't have people whose job is to sit around rotating certs for all of your clients or all of your endpoints every couple of years. So things like push button certificate delivery from Cloudflare, from other providers, is a big part of that. But NIST's guidance on crypto agility that came out within the last couple of months is really helpful, because it calls out that this is not just a technical change with new tools and technology. it's a process change to support an organization behaving differently and making the kinds of logical abstractions that make it possible to do the right thing and adopt changes more easily with lower risk and less expense later on. Part of the reason this is so challenging right now is because organizations 10 years ago, the last time they had to do this, didn't make process changes. And so they have unclear ownership. They still have cryptography that is baked into source code. It's a lot of rip and replace. And so they're going to have to go through all that pain again. But this time, when they do it, we're advising them to help yourselves, help your future self by putting in place flexibility that makes it easy for you to do the right thing, because NIST has another dozen standards in the pipeline. There's going to be more changes from around the world. It's unclear whether or not the modular lattice approach that we're using is going to stand the test of time mathematically. So we expect this kind of thing to be coming on a regular basis for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, so there are some skeptics still, right? And we all have talked to them over the last few months who say that, well, harvest now, decrypt later, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line. I don't need to worry about it now. Mm-hmm. Let me just put you both on the spot a little bit. What do you think is the realistic timeline that we will actually get those people a huge wake up call that this is actually either already broken or is going to be the encryption is going to be broken in the next 6 months or whatever, right?
So I think a year ago I would have had a different answer.
Sure.
I expected it was probably going to be by 2035,
sure.
maybe a little sooner.
Okay.
But in the last 4 months, we've had 5 completely different advances in quantum computing capability from 5 different vendors using 5 different approaches, most of them focused on error correction, which is the biggest area that we need to make advances in order to make this stuff practical. And one of them, like D-Wave, you can go out and rent time on their machine right now, and you can run stuff. So I think it's much more available than people outside the space realize.
So great. And hence we're getting all these questions because of all the changes that have happened. Trey, any perspective from you?
3 years, 6. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, who knows, right?
Come on, make a guess.
I think I mean, I would not be. This is one of the classic things where it's easy to sort of overestimate progression in the short term and you always underestimate it in the long sort of medium to long term. Yeah. And so I would not be surprised at all if 5 years from now we're looking at capable quantum computer that can execute on Shor's algorithm and break RSA.
That's actually a really good point. Somebody that I was talking to the other day, and I can't remember if it was Wesley from Cloudflare Research or somebody else, but they said, I'm not worried about Shor's algorithm running on a quantum computer in the future. I'm worried about an AI discovering a new algorithm nobody knows about that leverages what we already have and changes that collapse time from 5 years to 5 months. And we've already seen, like Google has an LLM that solved the CAPSET problem, which is an unsolved problem in mathematics. They wrote some Python code and said, go figure this out. And after a couple of million tries, it solved it, and humans had never solved it. And so that's the kind of thing that I think we're going to see the most potential for a surprise is the intersection of AI and computing capability, not just quantum, but also GPUs.
Got it. Well, let's shift gears for a little bit. Let's take a perspective of a CISO who has to deal with this. So as they're starting to think about, and a lot of them are, about their strategy to deal with this, what is the progression? What is the first step that they take in terms of what is the second step? And so maybe kind of walk us through what should a CISO think about as they're thinking about their post-quantum cryptography strategy?
Great question. I think it's honestly a lot like most big technology projects. Yeah. The first thing is to understand what it is that you're doing and why. Yeah. You have to have a plan, and the plan is not just what are the different pieces that I know that I need to change? The plan is, why am I doing this? Am I trying to satisfy regulators? Am I worried about a 30-year time horizon on my data? Am am I trying to expand into a new geography that I don't cover yet? I need to be able to adhere to their regulations. There's a lot of different reasons to do this stuff. And you need to take into account also, what are my constraints? What are my, vendors that are part of my ecosystem that I need to support? There's a lot of different inputs that are part of figuring out what's my order of operations, what's my timeline, what things are going to be the most difficult to do, what things are the most, business critical, what are the riskiest things. And all of these things are part of figuring out, okay, this then is how I start.
Sure. So you're suggesting an assessment to figure
Yes.
out what is it that I need to do, prioritize that.
Yes. You
and
need
then-
to have a
then-
plan
then
that's
have-
driven by business risk, not
Fair
by
enough.
your understanding of what technology you think you need to change. Start with the business risk and work backwards to the technical inputs.
And I think you bring a really good point about both managing the risk that is sort of represented by broken encryption and the regulatory risk. Like
Yes,
what's
sure.
the actual
Yeah.
driver here?
Yeah.
And we
Yes.
talked about, maybe in 5 years we've got quantum computers, but I think in under 5 years we're going to have regulations that require
Absolutely.
to be
Yeah.
A lot of them.
a lot of regulations are going to require to be post-quantum safe.
Sure.
And so I think I would completely agree with this idea of like, what problem are you actually solving? And I think the problem that most systems will see first is the regulatory requirement.
Yep. And that's another thing that's changed significantly between last year, this time, and right now is the regulatory environment has absolutely exploded. And even people who are skeptical that we'll ever have a quantum computer that can do large integer factoring, it doesn't matter. RSA is still deprecated in 2030. ECC is still going away. So whether or not we have the capability is almost irrelevant. You're still going to have to change in order to be compliant, and more changes are coming, which is why crypto agility is so important.
So you're both suggesting that we haven't learned our lessons and we're gonna still go after compliance and not risk as a way to think about security. So
People are going to end up doing the right thing for the long term, but potentially driven by short-term considerations. So compliance may be the lever, but if the outcome is long-term safety for your data and for your customers, then you're still going to get that good outcome.
got it. Now, one of the big things is because this feels really nebulous for a lot of C-suite executives, a lot of questions we get are, how do I even think about this investment? How do I propose that, well, next year I'm going to need some investment to start to drive this? If you were a CISO or if you're advising a CISO, how would you tell them to think about investing, and where would you ask them to invest initially in terms of the capabilities? Trey, maybe.
I mean, the easy starting point, I think, is how this requirement influences the rest of your strategy. The influences the rest of your buying. Something I've had conversations with financial services CISOs and security teams is let's say post-quantum or PQC safe cipher suites. Is that now in your purchasing decisions? Are you going into solutions that already have that? One is only a matter of time until that becomes a requirement. And so when will that requirement come in? So I think that's probably one of the easiest early steps, is how you can have this sort of influence other strategies.
So embed those into other buying decisions that you have so that it can get integrated and you can get that automatically as part of it. Okay, great.
I mean, and then obviously there is running an actual program
Sure.
for cryptographic agility and try to figure out what you need, what problem you're trying to solve and the best way to do that. And then I had a third point, but I'll come back to it.
Well, what do you think about, does every organization need a center of excellence to deal with this? I mean, do we actually need to build out a program for every organization?
So again, my favorite answer, it depends.
Of course.
It depends in part on the maturity of your organization and your technical folks. But I think part of my encouragement to CISOs and other execs is that this is not as scary and different as you think that it is. It actually operationally looks a whole lot more like any big tech modernization program or a patch and vulnerability management system writ large. If you've been around long enough to remember Y2K or swapping out DES for AES or one of those other things, this is like that, just bigger because there's more components and because your tech landscape has ballooned in the last decade.
And it's going to repeat.
Yes.
This is really the big
Yeah.
notion to get across, and I love your point. This is about automation.
Yep.
This is not just getting the next version. It's building the processes in place
Yes.
to continuously iterate to the next version.
Well, and that's a really good point, because to your point, tech transformations haven't had a good track record of success, right? And
No.
so everybody thinks about a transformation and they get scared, right? I mean, our
Yes.
data suggests 70% of them fail to deliver either on time, on budget, on capabilities, right? So really thinking about really granularly where are you going to impact, and presenting that to the CFO or the board or whatever in a pragmatic way becomes really, really important as you're building out the case, right?
We've talked to some customers that have had good success at taking an existing, like a 5-year transformation program and saying, okay, as we go through and do this, we're now going to just add quantum safe as a new requirement to code changes and to procurement and
That's
things
what Trey
like
was
that.
kind of alluding to, right?
I think that gets you part of the way there. But there's other things like swapping out all of your PKI and your certificate stuff and then chasing down all of your vendors that own various different things, that somebody's going to have to be responsible for that. And I think in most organizations, this is going to end up being honestly more of a large-scale project management exercise than a technical effort.
So who's responsible for it?
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that in most organizations, maybe 60 or 70% of what needs to be fixed is outside of your direct control. So part of this is going to be, software supply chain for, code that you write, code that you need to test. So, CI/CD pipeline, the whole thing. But a lot of it is who owns your operating systems, who owns your commercial software, who owns your routers and your firewalls and your load balancers. If you still have hardware stuff floating around, what's the roadmap for adoption for your hyperscalers, for your cloud providers? If you've got data in Salesforce or Snowflake or someplace else, what's their roadmap? And you don't have to fix that stuff, but you have to track that stuff. And one of the ways that you can actually reduce the burden of effort on your team is to switch to managed services wherever you can, because then it becomes the problem of an organization that usually has a much larger technical team to solve that for all of their customers. And you still have to track it, but you don't have to fix it yourself.
And that's a great answer. But I know we were talking about this yesterday, where network and security are not independent silos anymore. And the fact that that has to come together in terms of ownership, in terms of accountability, in terms of capabilities, and so on. So any thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, no, I really like this idea. This is one more motivation to drive towards services. This drive towards SaaS, service delivery. When you think about who owns it, yes, I think that's a sort of, you're never going to get outside of that problem, whether this is owned by the CIO or the CISO. I mean, it is a risk. If it ends up, the driver for it becomes regulatory, then I'm sure it becomes the CISO's problem or headache to go solve. But I completely agree with this idea that it is just one more reason to consume services.
Yeah.
Got it. And that's a really good segue into the last question, which is, where do you see this all going, right? So again, this is fast changing. So maybe 12 to 18 months, maybe get a perspective from both of you. Where do you think this is headed in terms of not just the landscape, but how are organizations going to react to what is being kind of developed as we speak? As you said, 5 vendors have already kind of put out stuff, right?
So I think in the next year and a half, we're going to see mostly a continuation of what's already going on and an acceleration driven by governments and regulatory changes. But especially, we hear about, balkanization of the internet and, geopolitical tensions causing more focus on sovereign cloud, sovereign data control. So I think we're going to continue to see that trend accelerate. And that means that the complications for this, for CISOs, especially for large international orgs, are going to increase. So executives need to get familiar with their international requirements. Don't assume that just because you're adhering to a standard that it's going to satisfy all
Apply
your
equally
requirements
across the globe.
internationally. Yeah.
Agreed.
Get familiar with your friends in compliance and law, because that landscape's going to get complicated.
Yeah, and not just one, but across the globe, every area that you're operating in. So yeah.
I would agree with everything you just said. And the other thing we're going to see are vendors trying to pull a fast one. There's going to be, we've already seen some examples of the way we get post-quantum is stick a key into a box and mail it to you. And look, that key exchange is post-quantum safe. And you're like, really?
That's key distribution, but it's not quantum key distribution.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but it's quantum safe key sharing. And you're like, oh my goodness. So, I mean, that is already happening. So I think we're going to start to see a divergence of the wheat from the shaft over time.
The other thing that I think is definitely going to happen in the next year and a half, and I'll go on the record for this, we're going to see some surprises at the intersection of AI and quantum and classical computing. The intersection of those three is going to lead to some breakthroughs that nobody's thinking about yet.
Do you want to kind of venture to talk maybe more what kind of breakthrough?
I think that we're going to see either a breakthrough against module lattice, which we just haven't been banging on it for long enough for especially the gray-haired cryptographers to really be comfortable with it, or we're going to see a new approach to factoring that no one has considered yet. That's going to work well on GPUs, quantum, and classical as a combination. Got it.
Well, this was a great conversation, and of course, it's very thoughtful for a lot of people to kind of get to know what they have to do, because a lot of people tend to be really confused about what's in it for them. We want to end with a rapid fire set of questions for both of you. And so I'll ask a question. I'll start with Trey, and then you can answer that as well. And these rapid fire questions it can be about PQE, but it doesn't have to be, right? So the first one is, if you had to describe the current state of cybersecurity in one word, what would that be?
Fractured.
Fractured.
That was going to be my word.
Oh, really? Oh, man. And we didn't even practice that. Yeah. It's much too fractured. Yeah.
I think it reflects the number of problems that are out there and the fact that a lot of people have a lot of different solutions for different things, but trying to figure out how to put those all together into a single business outcome is a really hard problem.
So you're saying that the platforms out there aren't going to solve that fracturing?
Nope.
Okay. So what is the one buzzword in security or tech that you wish we could retire? You can start with you.
Well, this might get me thrown out of RSA, but I don't think AI is going to solve all our problems.
Really? Come on.
It's gonna make some things easier, but it isn't going to replace the kind of high judgment things that CISOs and organizations have to do when they're thinking about why are we doing what we're doing and what kind of outcomes are we chasing.
It doesn't solve all problems, and it doesn't solve them all next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
If I had to choose, AI was actually toward the top of my list as well. If I had to choose, I think the misuse of a term is crypto when we're not talking about cryptography.
I have a sticker on my laptop that says crypto means cryptography.
Exactly.
Great. Well, thank you both. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I definitely learned a lot as part of it. We do have this as a series of conversations we're having with practitioners and experts like yourselves. The few upcoming ones are the perimeter problem or the lack thereof, the resilience being reimagined, because it can't be incrementally, the mindset can't incrementally change, so you have to kind of reimagine it. And of course, agile security in terms of what levers do you need to pull to be more agile with the threats. So please watch and follow us on social at Cloudflare TV. Subscribe to Security Signals wherever you are watching your podcasts. Download and read the Security Signals report at cloudflare.com/signals. Well, thank you again. Really pleasure to have you both, and really enjoyed the conversation.
It was a blast. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.